This meeting is now being recorded.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Defense Commission's very first webinar. We have never done one before, and so if there are hiccups today, I apologize. Nicole and I did mess around with the program a little bit before today to try to figure out all the different features. You should be seeing a screenshot of our website on your screen. If it's really tiny, there is a way to enlarge it on the right side of your screen. You should be able to make it 100% to make it a little bit bigger. Just wanted to direct you to the website because all of our forms, applications, anything that we put out will also be on the website. As you can see from our front page, the Indigent Defense Grant Applications do have a link on the front page. And I'll go here, so if you click on our website there, that will take you to our forms and reports. And then you've got the new Fiscal Year 2018 grant application and materials, and that includes all of the documents that you'll need for completing the grant application. There is, at the top of your screen, you should see a file library. I put the application and the instructions there, as well as the local share calculation form for ease of reference for you today. And then again, you have this Q&A button at the top. So as we go along, feel free to ask questions, and I'll try to get them all answered there. You can ask questions, and there is an option for me to respond publicly or privately. If you ask a question and would like for me to respond privately, just indicate so in your question, and I will do that. Of course, if this webinar doesn't answer all of your questions, we're here for you afterwards via telephone and or email. We're always happy to help. So what I think I'm going to do is simply just start going through the application form to go over the things that we are requesting in the application form and why we are requesting those things and what exactly we're asking for. So now, let me make sure I'm sharing the appropriate screen. You should now see the application on your screen. Again, if it's small, there should be a button on the right-hand side of your screen to make that big. What I have here is the fillable form. So you can type right into the form. And of course, the first box is pretty self-explanatory. For the date submitted, please put in the date that you mail it and or email it. That is the date that we will use because we have 60 days to respond to an application. We'll use that date as day 0, basically. For contact person, you should put in the person that our office can contact if we have questions about the application. It can be your public defender. It can be you, the clerks. It can be a commissioner. It can be someone in the clerk's office, just someone that would be able to answer some of the questions that are in the application. The primary indigent defense delivery system services, data reporting. This information is the same information that we asked for last year in the grant application. It just looks a little different. Method of delivery is simply whether you have a contract with your primary public defender or if it's an in-house office. The code section referenced there lists the different ways that counties can provide services for public defense, and that's really either by an in-house office or contract. And then we ask for the number of attorneys providing your primary services, and if all of your primary defending attorneys have contract or whether they're employees of the county. The number of cases handled by your primary defending attorneys. And just for reference, this section of the grant application will eventually go away. Once we can get public defenders reporting to us in their annual reports on the number of cases that they've handled in a year, we won't have to ask for this information. But right now, this is the best and easiest way for us to get this information and to assess it as we go forward. Counting cases. So how do we count cases? I don't have an example of an iStars report in front of you. I know many of you use iStars. And what I would be looking for on an iStars report in questioning whether or not I count a case, one, you look for the type of case. Is it a felony, a misdemeanor, or any of these other types of cases? The next thing I would look for is the date that the case was opened and handled for the substantive charge. And what I mean by substantive charge is the initial charge. So if it was a felony, say it's a possession of controlled substance, if the attorney handled the possession of controlled substance in between the dates of October 1st, 2015 and September 30th of 2016, then I would count that as a felony. If the attorney handled the underlying charge outside of those dates and then the case was closed, or maybe it was kept open for payment of fines or something else, then I would not count it as a felony for this time period. If the case was handled by the attorney as a probation violation between October 1st and September 30th, then I would count it as a felony, assuming it was a felony probation violation. Now, if the attorney handled the underlying charge and the probation violation in between October 1st and September 30th, you would count that twice. If the case was open during this period and all the attorney did on the case was attend a court hearing to see where the defendant was on paying fines, or the attorney filed a simple motion to move to unsupervised probation, if that's the kind of thing that was handled between October 1st and September 30th, I would not count that as a case. What we're trying to capture here is the workload of public defenders. So if the attorney had to handle an underlying charge, read through the case file, go to court several times, visit with the client, do investigation, then clearly we'd want that counted. The same kinds of things do happen on probation violations as well. But that kind of work doesn't generally take place when an attorney is simply filing a motion after sentencing, or just going to a basic review on the payment of fines or something like that. If you're having trouble trying to determine if something should be handled as a case or counted as a case, please let us know. I understand some of those iStars reports can be pretty confusing, and we're happy to walk you through it. I hope that was as clear as mud, but we'll go ahead and skip down to the next box, which is the conflict indigent defense delivery services. So you'll do the same process here that you did for your primary indigent defense delivery services box. Let us know how you provide those services. In fact, there's only one county that provides conflict services through an in-house office. Most everybody else either has a contract or, as I understand it, many counties still do sort of the assigned counsel system with their judges. That was removed by statute in 2014, and so the judges should be appointing conflict counsel only for attorneys that have contracts. And so we've been encouraging you to make sure you have contracts with your conflict attorneys. But I do ask here, if there are attorneys that provide conflict services without a contract, you are not going to get in trouble for answering yes, but this is a way for us to track who is providing public defender services in our state, because anybody who touches a public defense case within a year is subject to our standards, and so we'll need to know that information. You'll count your cases just the same way that you did with the primary indigent defense delivery services box. Trying to scroll slowly because I don't want to make anybody sick by scrolling through this document too quickly. Okay. The next section is brand new to the grant application process. This is just a way for us to find out how your grant funds were spent last year, and how much you have spent, how much you have left over, and if there's some left over, how you anticipate using those funds. This last box asks if there are any left over and how much you anticipate there being left over. Again, you won't get in trouble, or we're not going to come and take any of the funds that are left over. There's no mechanism for that. If you have a plan to use it in the next fiscal year for something else to improve your public defense system, that's okay. The only thing that I caution counties about in this regard is that if there are grant funds left over every single year, the net just may affect how much grant funding that we give to a county for the following year. That will be something that we take into consideration. I had a really good question not too long ago about banking grant funds for the next year because you have a project that you want to do for your public defense system, and I think that is totally fine. Just make sure you indicate here on the application that you're planning on doing that so that we know that it's not just left over and kind of hanging out there. Okay. Sorry for the silence for a moment. I've received a couple questions. I'm just going to read them real quickly. Okay, we have a good question here that says, when reporting grant fund expenditures, should we consider the difference between what was expended prior to receipt of grant money? This is from Cherie. Can you clarify your question a little bit? I think I know what you're asking, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to so Cherie clarifies her question. Do we count all expenditures or only the difference between the previous year? I would count all of your expenditures. So when you're listing your expenditures for fiscal year 2016, please include all of your expenditures. Carrie Bird asks, if we received reports from our public defenders, can we use those numbers for reporting? As long as they match the data reporting dates on here, and I think they do, as long as your public defenders were not reporting to you in calendar year, because we'd like to know what your fiscal year numbers look like. But yes, you're welcome to use their numbers. In fact, that would probably be an accurate way, and that'd be great if your public defenders are reporting to you. So we'll go to the fiscal year 2016 Indigent Defense Expenditures and local share calculation. This top portion of the box where it asks what sources your expenditures came from is the same as last year. What we would like to see is how much of your expenditures came from the general fund. If you want to give us a percentage, that would be okay. Apparently it won't let me put the percent symbol in there, so if you just put a percentage, obviously it would just be two numbers, or you can, it's just let me put numbers, so if you put in a number like that, then we'll know that that's a monetary amount. But either way will be fine. If it comes from a different area, make sure that you put the type of fund here, if you have a public defense fund or something like that. The next portion of this box is a little different than last year. The form we're looking at here is fillable, so once I start entering numbers, it's going to update that total for me, as you'll see. And those numbers are obviously just random numbers, and they don't make any sense. The total is what we asked for last year. All I'm asking for this year is the amount you spent on attorney services for your primary versus your conflict attorneys, and then everything else in the third column. So if you paid your 3 primary public defenders a total of $150,000, and that's what you would put in the first box. And then if your conflict attorneys, if you paid them $75,000, you'll put that in the next box. And then the third column would be all primary and all conflict investigation, evaluations, anything else that was spent on public defense in your county would go into this box. And then it updates the total for us there. And you'll do that for fiscal years 13 through 16, and then obviously fiscal year 2017 is a projection. And we just ask that you give us the best numbers that you have. We will, the reason we ask for that is so that for the next year, we can see where, how much we need in grant funding, how much we need to go back to the state and say, hey, we need more money, or this is what we're going to need to continue funding the Indigent Defense Grants. Okay. The local I'm not, if you cannot break out the past year's expenses, I'm not really worried about it. So for fiscal years 13 through 15 at least, I would love it if you could break it down for me for fiscal year 2016, but if you can't, that's totally okay. But in terms of breaking it down between primary and conflict, if that's something that's just going to take you too much time and it's a big burden, totally okay if you just put in the totals for me. Of course, we do have the totals, unless there's a change from last year's grant applications. We do have the totals from 13 through 15, and we just ask you to put those totals back in there. But if you can break them down, that'd be great. Part of this is to assess what our primary public defender services have been costing Idaho versus the conflict public defenders. And assessing it backwards is also just as important as assessing it forward. And Michelle, yes, so for fiscal year 2017, we'd like a projection of what you anticipate spending on public defense, not what you've spent overall yet for the year. And we just like to see those numbers just to assess whether those are still increasing, how that's affecting your county, how the standards and improvements and things like that are affecting your county. Fiscal year 2018 local share is the median amount of fiscal year 2013, 2014, and 2015. In your file library on the webinar here, you do have an Excel spreadsheet with the way to calculate your local share. I'm just going to open it up here, show you how that works. So you should now see on your screen an Excel spreadsheet where you're calculating your local share. We want to calculate it for 2018. I would enter 2018 into the orange box. So that updates the years that we're requesting on the grant application for expenditures. The statute says we calculate it from the first 3 years of the preceding 5 years. So that's 2013, 2014, and 2015. And you would enter your total amount for 2013, 2014, and 2015 into the appropriate boxes. So I will do that. Just some random numbers. And so the local share will automatically calculate your median for you. And this eligible grant award amount down here is either going to be $25,000 or 15% of your local share, whichever is greater. And for this amount, it's the $25,000. And so that's how you calculate your local share, which will go into this box, and then you would put the eligible amount into that box there. And then as the clerk, you would just certify that these were the expenditures. Okay, we'll move on to I'm going to review and see if I have any additional questions yet. Okay. So Cherie asks if you're supposed to be able to download the Excel calculator from the Files button. That was my understanding on how this program worked. She said hers is inactive. However, this form is also, here we go. So if you go to our website, so now you should see our website, the Forms and Reports page. The third form down is the local share and grant calculation form, so you can get it there if you're having trouble downloading it through this webinar program. Okay, I'm back to the grant application. We're on page 4 of 9. This is a new portion of the grant application. This looks pretty daunting, and it does ask a lot of questions. It is something that is required by the statute, and it addresses whether or not a county is in compliance with the standards that have been created. The statute requires that counties be in compliance with standards that were in effect as of May 1 of any given year, and they must come into compliance by March 31st of the following year. We did not have any standards in place May 1 of 2016, so this compliance plan section probably won't be nearly as robust as it will be in future years. But I put it in this year's grant application sort of as a practice round, if you will. And we would like some information in here so we can see where public defense might need some improvement across the state, or where it might not need improvement. But this will give us some good information about the public defense system in your county. And then we can take a look and see if it needs improvement, and that helps us give us some more information for the legislature when we go back and make recommendations on how to improve the system and to ask them for additional monies to help with those improvements. So the first part of this page, page 4 here, asks about your primary and conflict services. These will probably be the same answers that you gave back on page 2 in the data reporting section, but we just want to make sure that your county is still intending on providing services in the same manner. A couple of years ago, Canyon County, for instance, would have said, well, last year we provided by contract, but this next year we're going to provide it by in-house services. And so this one just says, how are you providing them for fiscal year 2017? And outside of Power and Oneida, I think everybody's providing them in the same method they did in fiscal year 2016. The compliance plan portion. The first question is the county in compliance with indigent defense standards? Technically, every county is in compliance, simply because there were no standards in place as of May 1 last year. We'll let you know that the legislature did approve the standards that we created this past year. So there are going to be standards in place as of May 1 in a few weeks. And so the counties will need to come into compliance with those standards by March of 2018. These standards include having an attorney at initial appearance, having attorneys handle cases by vertical representation, which means the same attorney handling the case all the way through instead of passing the case from attorney to attorney. There are some performance standards for defending attorneys, including a 7-hour-a-year continuing legal education requirement. And then, as most of you know, we did not put a caseload standard in those standards this year. Those were removed. We are currently conducting a workload study, and so you might see a caseload standard this next year when we do another round of creating standards. So the first question in this section, all the counties can say they were in compliance. It's a great question from Carrie. If we have court-appointed conflict attorneys who don't report to Public Defense Commission, is the county going to be considered as out of compliance because the attorneys didn't file reports with the commission? No, Carrie, they will not. Even court-appointed conflict attorneys are required to file annual reports, but we did not require, even though it's statutorily required, we are not requiring it this year, which would have been this past November, because everybody's still getting used to the process, and the Public Defense Commission was just added as a recipient of those reports. We will be requiring those this November. The public defenders have been notified, and if they're court-appointed conflict attorneys, this is why it's important for us to know whether or not you have contracts with all your attorneys or not, because we need to know who these court-appointed conflict attorneys are so we can notify them that they'll also need to be filing annual reports. This is a really great question for us at this time because I'll let you all know that we are going to be creating standards regarding enforcement and compliance. And so we will address the issue of if a public defender doesn't file an annual report, or if a public defender doesn't comply with standards, how does that affect the county? We don't know the answer to that question yet. That's something that the Commission is considering in the next several months. If you'd like to be a part of that discussion, we just ask you to shoot us an email and let us know. I imagine we'll be having meetings and hearings about that over the next several months to talk about how we deal with public defenders not complying. We certainly don't want to withhold grant money from a county because their public defenders are not complying with standards. That is something we're certainly aware of. Question number 2 in the compliance plan. just asks how your county is not meeting indigent defense standards. Again, since there were no standards in place as of May 1 of last year, this is sort of a moot question. But if you know that perhaps your county, your attorneys have not been attending initial appearances in the past, maybe put in here, maybe note that here in this section, and then as you go down through the application, you can talk about how your county will assure that public defenders are attending those initial appearances. And so I would just visit our website, make sure you're familiar with the standards, and just kind of note whether or not the county is going to be meeting those standards in the next year. Because again, they're not required for this year, but we would just like some information so that we can assess how to get compliance as we go forward, and how to help you and how to be a resource to you in regards to those standards. Question 3 just asks how the county plans on meeting the defense standards. So if, for example, if it's in regards to having an attorney at initial appearance, if your county has a plan to use video services, video conferencing or Skype or something like that because your attorney lives far away, then just let us know that in that box. I have a great question from Brenda. How do we monitor compliance of abilities, training, or experience when we only contract with a public defender? It will not be the job of the county to monitor compliance, although it would be recommended that in your contracts with your public defenders that you require them to comply with our standards or to comply with certain training requirements, however you would like your public defenders to be qualified. As we go forward, we will help you and we will be the ones monitoring compliance. We're in the process of hiring 3 regional coordinators throughout the state, and those regional coordinators will be the kind of the boots on the ground for the different districts to help assess whether or not public defenders are complying with training, within reporting, and those kinds of things. And Kathy asked a great question, if we will coordinate with the Supreme Court on training judges on the standards. Absolutely, Kathy. That is one of our big goals for this year. We're working with Justice Linda Trout, who is on our commission, to start a more robust communication with the judges around the state. We did meet with a few administrative district judges last year, kind of explaining what we were doing and where we were going. But we didn't get to everybody around the state, and that's something that is certainly on our priority list for this year. So that's a great question. Back to the grant application on page 5 here. How does the county plan to remedy deficiencies? And again, I'll just say no county is deficient at this point because there's no standards in place. However, in the future, this will be a question that is required by the statute. So if, say, this was in regards to the initial appearance, you might put here, we will use the Indigent Defense Grant Fund to buy a video system that will help the attorney appear at all initial appearances and also provide a mechanism for that attorney to speak with their client, something like that. Question 5, this question here asks for a detailed cost analysis. It sounds a little scary to me. It's language I pulled directly from the statutes. This would just be, well, we looked up a video system for the initial appearance and it's going to cost us $10,000, and so you would put that in this box. And when you're asking for grant money in the future, and you're looking at the standards, you would say, okay, so we need $10,000 for the video system. We're going to need, $5,000 to have a brand new computer for the attorney so that he can log into the video system or something like that. And you would just kind of put that in this box to show what kind of funds are necessary to comply with the standards that we have created. And then the very next box or the last box in this section just says if the county is compliant, which everybody is compliant, as I've explained, just provide a detailed plan here on how you're going to use your Indigent Defense Grant funds this next year to improve your Indigent Defense Delivery System. For this section here, I would recommend taking a look at the standards that will be in place as of May 1, 2017. And if your county is in compliance, then I would look at other ways to improve the public defense system. If it's not going to be in compliance with those standards, then I would look for ways to spend that money or to use the grant money to comply with those standards so that you don't have to play catch up next year. If the amount that you're eligible for is not going to be enough, I would write that in this box or somewhere on the application and provide us the reason why and that you've done some sort of cost analysis to show that. Because again, that kind of information helps us kind of go to the legislature and say, hey, this is what the counties are going to need and this is what we need to improve the system in the state. I have a question from Kathy. Do we have to have a different use for grant funding each year? No, you do not. If you're in compliance or if you need to use the funding each year for the same reason to come into compliance, you're absolutely welcome to use it for the same thing. This might become relevant if, you needed to use the grant funding to hire an attorney or to hire support staff, and then you need to continue to fund that position. That would totally be okay. As the same as last year, 2 commissioners need to sign as well as the clerk of the board. This is just to say that if we're asking for a grant fund and grant funding, and what we've put in here is true to the best of our knowledge. Form A just asks for a list of the public defenders that are providing services in your county. In the fillable form, you can insert the name, whether they're primary or conflict, whether they have an existing contract. If they're a chief public defender, you can select chief public defender, and then the type of cases that they handle. If you have an institutional public defender office in your county, you only have to put the chief public defender's name on this list. You do not need to put all the staff attorneys in that office, but I would ask that if you have, a conflict defender, conflict attorneys in the county, that you would include them on this list. Okay. Form B, this form is the same as the one that was provided in last year's grant application. If your county is planning on becoming a joint county to provide public defender services, go ahead and you would answer yes on this form. Appendix A just gives you a list of things to include in your indigent defense expenditures. And that is the grant application. I will go back to the website here, just show you a few things. There is an application overview on the website. This will open up to a Word doc. And this just kind of tells you what things you should have available to you when you're filling out the grant application and the information requested. This is it's a one-page version of the instructions. Then there is a non-fillable form on the website, so if you'd rather fill it out by hand, you're welcome to print that out. The only difference between the fillable is if you print out the fillable on the Indigent Defense Expenditures one, you're going to get a bunch of zeros in that total column. And so the non-fillable one will be blank, so you're not having to write over the zeros. We're asking that you submit a compliance checklist with your grant application. This goes through standards, and then this is just sort of an easy way for us to get a snapshot of your county, how you're providing services, and that kind of thing. The first box here talks about your delivery model. Institutional office is an in-house office. Joint institutional office, that would apply to Minidoka and Cassia and Power and Oneida. I don't think any county contracts with an existing public defender's office, so I don't think anybody will be marking that. If you provide, if you have an institutional office and you contract, and you would, with your conflict attorneys, then you would select institutional office and contract defending attorney for conflict services. If all your public defenders have submitted their annual reporting forms, you can check this box. If they have not, please don't check that box. You're not going to get in trouble for that. Right now, that was something that wasn't required for this last year. We're just trying to see who's submitting them and who's not at this juncture, so we can follow up with the people that are not already submitting them to make sure that they get them submitted for this next year. Evidence evaluation facilities. This is something that's in the statute. It's been in the statute for many years. It just says that the public defenders should have access to the same state facilities to review evidence. It's not a standard. It's a statutory requirement. And we're just curious if all the counties have this type of facility. If you don't know, just put don't know. But that way we know to follow up with the appropriate folks on that issue. One of the requirements in the statute is that counties maintain their local share, and so your indigent defense budget for the upcoming year should not be any lower than your local share from last year. If you don't recall what your local share was from last year, just give us a shout. I've got all those figures, and we can let you know. Idaho's principles, the next box lists two documents. The Idaho's Principles of an Indigent Defense Delivery System and the Standards for Defending Attorneys. These two documents are available on our website. They are, let's see, under the Indigent Defense Grant Application materials, they're right here and right here. Those are, sorry about that. Those are the documents that will be in effect as of May 1, and the counties will need to come into compliance with those by March 31st of 2018. Those talk about the initial appearance requirement, vertical representation, training requirement for public defenders that I mentioned earlier. And in the very last box, this just asks us to use your grant money to improve indigent defense in your system. This does reference an indigent defense grant audit form that does not exist. I apologize for that. I meant to create that. It just never got created. But if you did use your grant money to improve indigent defense, just check that box. Do not worry about the audit form. And then there will be one county that we'll check that did not apply for the Indigent Defense Grant, so just check that box. And this is just a quick checklist for us to place in our files with the grant form. As you'll note here in the instructions on this form, anything that is bolded is either a standard or is a statutory directive. Currently, these are the ones that are bolded here are statutory directives. Anything that's underlined is not a standard yet, but is anticipated to be a standard. And so we encourage compliance with those. Again, they're not required. Also on the website is the application instructions for the Indigent Defense Grant Application. If that does not answer your questions and the webinar does not answer your questions today, please give me a shout. And then what you see here, IDAPA 610107, that is the rule that we created that incorporates the standards that go into effect on May 1. I need to update the website because this section right here that says requires final approval, they were approved by the legislature, and so I will remove that section because they will be in effect as of May 1. Okay, and before we sign off here, I do just want to mention to you, since I've got most of the counties here on the line, that our Extraordinary Litigation Fund application is active and available on our website. We have over $1 million left in our funds to distribute to counties if you had an extraordinary case, and the expenses would have had to have been incurred after July 1st of 2016. But if your counties had some extraordinary expenses this year for a murder case, a complex drug case, a retrial of a case, anything, we would encourage you to talk to your public defenders to file an application. The statute requires that the attorney file the application. Otherwise, I would be asking county commissioners or someone to think about doing that. But the statute requires that an attorney do so. And so if you had an attorney in your county that handled a murder case, complex drug case, had lots of experts or lots of investigation, we would highly encourage you to file an application. Because of the amount of funding we have, we will likely approve any request that is deemed extraordinary. So we would encourage you to talk to your public defenders and get those applications in. If you have a question about what might count as extraordinary, you can ask here, or you can shoot us an email or a phone call. One thing I will mention about the Extraordinary Litigation Fund, or the ELF as I like to call it, in the future, so next year for the state fiscal year after July 1, it will be for prospective costs only. But because we have the funding this year, and it took us a while to define extraordinary litigation, we are allowing for reimbursement. So anything that was incurred after July 1st of 2016, we will consider for your application. And so there's an application here on the website. There's the policy that defines extraordinary litigation, but there's also this reimbursement request. So if the request is for reimbursement from this year, we just ask you to file this additional document along with the application. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I am not going to log out yet. Just in case some additional questions pop up on my screen here, or I'm scrolling through to make sure I got them all answered. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.